Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to day two of Limitless 2022 for Children for Change for Life, World Vision's Asia Summit for Corporate Good, with the theme From Crisis to Hope How Corporations Can Lead Sustainable Change. On day one, we had thought provoking discussions on how corporations can lead sustainable change, the challenges and the modalities of engaging youth in inclusive economic growth, and then talk about how technology can be made an enabler for equitable education. We also had four country sessions from India, Mongolia, Philippines, and Sri Lanka. Let's watch a quick video recap of day one. Before we begin our summit proper, we would like to establish a few program guidelines to ensure that the summit would go smoothly and run on schedule. Should you have any questions during the sessions, you may send them in through the Q&A tab found at the top right corner of your screens. The public chat is open for everyone to send in their thoughts and comments throughout the sessions. Program reminders will also be sent in through this chat. The country booths are open throughout the day. We encourage you to visit each one of them to get to know more about World Vision and its field offices. The lounge is open throughout the day. Please feel free to virtually roam around and meet like-minded and like-hearted individuals attending today's sessions. As we thrive to better ourselves every year, we are encouraging you to send us your thoughts and comments on today's event. Access link to your online feedback form will be shared via chat prompt at the end of today's sessions. With these program guidelines in mind, we hope to give both our speakers and you, our audience, a conducive online atmosphere and a seamless, interactive, insightful, and meaningful summit. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the third session of Limitless 2022. The session is entitled Sustainable Food Systems, Interplay of Community, Corporations, and Civil Society. The target of zero hunger world by 2030 is under threat. With conflicts, climate change, and COVID, the road to ending hunger and poverty seem to be so far ahead. Listen in to our experts invited to this session on their thoughts on the challenges, best practices, and innovations in achieving a hunger-free world. Please turn your attention to the screen as we introduce our panelists. We have with us Mr. Amri Ilma, Chief Operating Officer for EduFarmers International. AgriFarmers International is a non-profit organization that aims to improve the agricultural practices and livelihood of smallholder farmers in Indonesia through education and training, research, and technological innovations. He previously worked in policy advocacy and projects focused on poverty alleviation and sustainability. We also have the esteemed presence of David John Whitehead, chairman of Marvin Group. In 2004, David joined Ausfeed Vietnam as a founding director. Ausfeed became the Marvin Group, and David was appointed chairman of the board. Marvin is a large, fully integrated farm-to-table agribusiness headquarters in Hanoi with feed mills, veterinary medicine, and food manufacturing plants and farms throughout Vietnam. Marvin is one of the top 10 agribusinesses in Vietnam and holds an enviable position as the most innovative in the industry, embracing advanced technology and a digital transformation program which began in 2019. Let me also welcome Peggy Chan, Executive Director, Zero Footprint Asia. In 2012, Grassroots Pantry in Hong Kong with a mission to raise awareness of the inequities in our food system and to share knowledge on the benefits of whole food, plant-based cuisine. Grassroots Pantry was recognized by the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals (ESCAP) as a best practice case study on sustainable sourcing and responsible management. In 2020, Peggy developed Grassroots Initiative Consultancy to assist food service professionals in their transition towards best practices that meet both human and planetary health goals. We are also glad to welcome Jody Busek, Nutrition Segment Lead for APAC for DSM. Creating brighter lives for all inspires her to work alongside like-minded civil society, public and private sector partners to find sustainable, affordable, and accessible nutrition solutions for our world's most vulnerable. She shares more than 30 years of experience in business and market development in the food and nutrition industry. In this critical session, we are honored to have Paul Newenham leading a relevant, timely, and insightful conversation. Paul is the Director of Sustainable Development Goals Advocacy Hub, a secretariat catalyzing, convening, and connecting NGOs, advocacy groups, civil society, the private sector, and the UN agencies to coordinate global campaigning and advocacy to achieve food systems transformation. Paul also facilitates a network of 1,000+ chefs from across 90 countries to support chefs' action on the SDGs. The chefs, through Chefs Manifesto, are equipped with simple set of actions to drive progress to achieve the 2030 agenda. Over to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Raul, and it's so great to be back together with World Vision, having worked for World Vision for many, many years around the world. And so it's great to see this event coming together to really look at how we can gather together to drive change. As Raul mentioned, my name's Paul Newnham, the Director of the SDG2 Advocacy Hub and the coordinator of the Chefs Manifesto. I'm so excited to be moderating today's discussion around sustainable food systems and the interplay of community, corporations, and civil society. Today, as mentioned, we have such significant challenges to achieving a zero hunger world and good food for all. Climate change, economic shocks, COVID-19, conflict, and most recently, a cost of living crisis are driving an increase in hunger around the world. According to the recently published State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report, most of the world's undernourished people live in Asia. 425 million people out of the world's total of 768 million hungry people. And this is staggering. This figure of 425 million equates to 9.1% of Asia's population going to bed hungry. From 2020 to 2022, there was a rise of severe food insecurity in 4 out of 6 subregions, and the gender gap in food insecurity has grown. The cost of a healthy diet rose to $3.72 USD per person per day, a 4% increase from 2019 to 2020. And you know, we all know that 2021 is going to have seen a further increase here. However, we know that good food is a connector. It's everything. It starts with farmers who work on the front lines of our food system and the climate crisis, often under very difficult circumstances. Good food, when it's nutritious gives people the nutrients they need to thrive. It nourishes the soil it grows in and the next generation. It provides us with the energy that we need to fight for a better future for everyone everywhere. So today's conversation is going to gather an exciting group of diverse voices, which you've just been introduced to, from across nutrition and food, to discuss both the challenges and the opportunities in securing a sustainable, nutritious food future for all. We want this event to be as engaging and dynamic as yesterday was. So please go into the chat box, introduce yourself, where you're from in the chat, so we can see where people are tuning in from. I can see people from India already, and different parts of the world coming in. So please make sure you go in there and introduce yourself. Philippines, different parts of the world. As the discussion develops, we also want you to utilize that the question function as well. We're going to try and keep a small amount of time at the end of today's event for panelists to respond to these questions and to interact with the audience. But why don't we get straight into it and get going? It's good to see. Welcome, everyone. We've got some people very late from New York, all the way through to the Philippines, from Japan, from India. So great to see. So I'll ask my panelists if they can turn on their cameras, and we'll get started. We're going to keep this fast moving and dynamic, and so hopefully going to have that time for questions later. But so let's start and drawing on some of the insights and experiences of our panelists from across the Asia region. We're going to start by setting the scene. And so it would be good to understand from each of you, what are some of the main issues concerning good food being available to all in the region, and how have you seen these addressed? So I'm going to start with you, Chef Peggy. Let's start with you. Quick introduction, but you've had the bigger introduction already, and then how have you experienced some of the challenges to food availability in Asia?
Hi guys, great to be here. Peggy, I'm calling in from Hong Kong. For the past 20 years, I've been working in food service side, so really focused on the consumption end of the entire food value chain. Some of the major issues that we are currently seeing in Hong Kong, first and foremost, price increases, supply chain shortages. So chefs would have to try to look for ingredients that can be replaceable to what they're used to. There's also a severe lack of food security in terms of Hong Kong used to grow 2/3 of the vegetables that it produced back in the 60s, 70s, but now we actually produce less than 1%. So we are relying on a lot of mainland produces from all over the world. And we also see that the climate crisis is affecting all of these countries in all of these areas that we rely on for food. And of that, 1 out of 4 people in Hong Kong is also food insecure and also suffering from poverty. So there's a lot of income gap situation that is occurring. And so these are some of the real challenges that we're seeing in cities like us in Asia.
Yeah, thanks, Peggy. And we might come back to that, ingredients that we're having to substitute around, and where that could also become a challenge that becomes positive as well, like in terms of thinking of diversity. Amri, let me bring you in. Can you tell us a little bit about Edu Farmers Foundation and just set the scene for us in Indonesia?
Sure. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm calling from Jakarta. My name is Amri Ilma. I'm the CEO of Edu Farmer International. It's a non-profit organization that aims to improve the livelihood of smallholder farmers through the increase and improvement of yield and quality. So some of our main activities are, first, doing research to improve yield of various commodities. Currently, we're focusing on maize, horticulture, broiler chicken, and layer chicken. Through the research and our demo plots. The second is we do our main program, Farming for the Nation program. This is basically similar to Teach for America, but for farming, where we organize hundreds of university students annually to live with farmers to improve their productivity. And the third one, we're also doing a stunting prevention and reduction program through the agriculture-based approach, such as the backyard farming or poultry program. So relating to your questions, Paul, I think it's you, as you already mentioned, right? We currently have the triple C crisis, which is the COVID-19 conflict and climate change. But one of the things that we're also seeing in the region, especially in Southeast Asia, is also in terms of the supply chain disruption. So a recent example would be like the Malaysia has stopped exporting chicken to Singapore, and it's actually account for around 20% of the Singapore national consumption. And therefore, like Indonesia, they ask for help for Indonesia, and Indonesia need to fill the gap of the remaining percentage of the consumption of chicken. So that's one of the example. And I think we also face the price increases with the current inflation that happen in across countries. So the obviously like the ability to buy food is also decreased across people in Indonesia and the region. And how is it addressed? So in Indonesia, the government has started to try to reduce the reliance of important of foods. So for example, in 2021, the government of Indonesia has pushed for more local production in agriculture sector through the public sector backed food estates in more than 165,000 hectares in 2 provinces. Another thing is that the government has also started thinking for a coordinated effort to reduce food loss and food waste. That is, like account for 1/3 of all the edible food is actually wasted through the like the supply chain process or through the consumption. Yeah.
No, that's great.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, thanks, Amri, and I think supply chains is something that we will talk further on. Judy, I want to bring you in. As the DSM nutritional products segment lead for the Asia Pacific region, what strikes you about what Chef Peggy and Amri's remarks so far, and what would you add to this analysis?
Hi, Paul. Thank you. Judy Bocek, and I hail from Singapore. I think it's to what you made the point earlier. Good food it has to be tasty, nourish our minds and bodies. We have to be able to use that to thrive and stay healthy to reach our full potential. And as you mentioned, half of the world's undernourished live in Asia. So the issues are what I call the AAA threats, accessibility, affordability, and awareness. The marginalized and vulnerable groups, especially women and children, displaced people, suffer from food insecurity. The pandemic has restricted access to local food markets and social safety net programs, for instance, like school meals. And with the price volatility that Amri had mentioned with respect to chickens, this exists and persists. And those who work in the informal sector, who often live day to day, they can't afford to put food on their table. And this lack of awareness, do people know what healthy diets consist of? And I think one of the underappreciated is the benefits of food fortification. It's not new. It addresses micronutrient deficiency, also known as hidden hunger, and has such lifelong impacts because the existence of micronutrient deficiencies increases susceptibility of the NCDs, the non-communicable diseases. And so more than ever, it's so important now to focus on food fortification and amplify that. As I've said, it's so underappreciated. It's such a cost-effective approach where people's habits don't change by benefiting from food fortification. The World Bank and the Copenhagen Consensus have both ranked that fortification is one of the best investments. For every dollar in food fortification generates $27 in economic return from averted disease, improved earnings, and enhanced work productivity. That's something to digest because the return on investment is incredible.
No, thanks, Judy. And I note those numbers earlier about the number of people across Asia going to bed hungry, and connecting that to food fortification, because when hunger is one thing, but then also that often leads to nutrition deficiencies. because diet, people don't have those choices in diet. And so fortification is a great way to ensure that the staples that are getting through for people that can't afford are getting those micro and macronutrients so that we avoid some of those challenges. So thank you for raising that as an important kind of addition in this complex world of sustainable food systems. I'm going to bring in David. So David, you're the chairman of the Marvin Group, and you work to make Vietnam a sustainable agribusiness powerhouse. So tell me a little bit about what some of your reflections are and on where we're at the moment.
Yeah, look, this is a very, very interesting subject for me. I mean, we started as a small feed miller, just manufacturing pelleted, packaged pig feed, really. And that was nearly 20 years ago. We've now moved into a really different phase of operation where we are an agri-food business now. And our concentration is on the end result of our business is providing good quality food for the people. So it's been interesting in Vietnam since I first came here and our business started 20 years ago, that now there is a burgeoning middle and upper class group of people who have discretionary income who are now concerned about the quality of food they bring into their households. And the issues about traceability and hygiene, being fresh and nutritious, are issues that are being addressed and being focused on by those in the middle and upper classes who have the money and the ability and the wherewithal to actually be selective about their food choices. Still in Vietnam, we have people in poverty, and the way we work with World Vision is to work with poor communities, and we provide sustainable farming and lifestyle operations with poor communities, working with World Visions. So, we're looking at both ends of the spectrum, really, as far as our operations are concerned. We breed and we farm chicken, ducks, pigs, and fish. But one of the big issues for us, as others have mentioned, is the logistics and the management and the movement of product, not only around the country, but internationally too. And the issue about the cost of logistics, shortening supply chains is a major concern for us as we move forward. Yeah. But we've been in the middle of a very fast growth cycle in Vietnam, and we're privileged to be able to work in a sector that's extremely important and valuable, not only in this country but in the region.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. And it's good to have this group together. It's really, these are really important additions to kind of look at the holistic picture of what's going on. Before we jump into our next set of questions, I just want to make sure the audience is thinking about how they're going to contribute. So I want to hear from you either in the chat or also in questions that you might have based on what people are raising. So if there's something you're not sure about, if you're not understanding, or you would like some more information around, please add a question for later on. And then also in the chat, please help contribute your perspectives. It's important for us to hear and understand what's going on from around the whole of the world. So as we kind of move forward, we've just seen 4 different perspectives from 4 different actors. And I think, when we talk about food and food systems, it's really important to ensure that we understand that there isn't just one system. There's lots of different systems and there's lots of actors. And we all have a role to play in ensuring a better food future. And so, as we started to talk in the preparations for this dialogue, there was a lot of feedback on the different approaches and how they are, they need to work in a synergistic way. So I want to kind of get into what are some of those synergies between the business sector, agriculture, civil society that can help us really achieve zero hunger and good food for all. So Amri, I'm going to start with you. On the production side of our food system, what are some of the challenges for farmers in the region, and how can the private sector meet farmers' needs in getting food to market, providing improved seed varieties, etc., that kind of thing? What's your thoughts around that?
Sure. Thank you, Paul. So yeah, answering to your question, some of the challenge that we see, especially in Indonesia and the region related to the farmers, is first, I think the main and foremost is the capability of the farmers to do a good agricultural practice and also a good farm management. So this consists of starting from preparing the land, like doing the cultivation to harvesting and even to post harvesting. The second one, I think it's also related to access to finance. So even if farmers already have the capability to do a good agricultural practice, but if they cannot afford to buy the optimum inputs for production, then they will not be able to get to the point of the production that they desire, right? This is, I think, also related to the money management at the household level for
Yeah.
farmers. Sometimes it's easy for them, like when there is a harvest, just to spend the money all at once and not doing a really good money management, and therefore they cannot really prepare for the next planting period. The third one, I think, this also related to price volatility that that can also disrupt the production due to changes in farmers' production preferences. For example, what we see in Indonesia and North Sumatra, coffee farmers sometimes switch to other commodities when the price of coffee is actually decreasing, which is not very ideal, right? Because coffee is not like the plant that's grow in the short amount period of time, and they switch from one crops to another crops for a long time. And there's also risk of drought, flood, and other climate issue, and also access to market. And I think how private sector can help. There are certain pathways. The first one, I think, the private sector can continue to do research to provide high quality seed that is suitable for specific areas, right? Because it's not only research on like producing a yield that is optimum, but also optimum for specific area in many
Yeah.
regions. The second one, I think, it's related to contract farming. Contract farming is really helping the smallholder farmers, because in one way, it's also providing access to finance for farmers to buy optimum inputs, and there is a certainty of off-taker, because like whatever the farmer produce, it will be bought by the off-taker. And the third one, I think, agricultural insurance to manage risks that farmers faces. And the last one, but not least, I think it's also what we're doing here, which is to provide continuous training and support for farmers. Yeah, I think that's all,
Yeah.
Paul. Thank you.
No, thanks, Amri, and thank you for really giving really practical points that can be utilized for the listeners. Chef Peggy, I just want to bring you in. So, how are you working with business and farmers to ensure good food for all, whether that's through safeguarding biodiversity, preventing food waste, or protecting soil health? And also, maybe if you can just give a few reflections on the unique benefits that the hospitality sector can provide to enable food sovereignty as well.
Certainly. Well, when we talk about hunger and the situations that we are currently facing in the world, we can't forget that one of the reasons for why food is becoming less nutritious is because of soil degradation. And soil degradation occurs when bad practices on the land, on the farms happen, such as these additional fertilizer chemical inputs, excess nitrogen, heavy tillage on the soil that actually breaks up the soil food web. And it's actually estimated that food is so much more less nutritious than what our grandfathers and grandmothers used to eat. And it's also said that about 200 industrial carrots needs to be eaten in order to meet one regeneratively grown carrot's nutrition. So that's kind of what we're really facing is, how do we grow food in the future, in the coming years, such that we are ensuring farmers' livelihoods are being treated fairly, or they're being paid fairly, that there's resiliency to climate, that food is more nutritious, more tasty, and the yields can also be just as effective as industrially grown food. So when it comes to how we engage, I'm also the executive director of Zero Footprint Asia, which is a nonprofit that we brought in from California. So what we do is basically utilize the hospitality sector and food businesses to engage them. Very often we don't see, as chefs or in food businesses, we don't really have a say in a way, or think that we can make any changes directly to the food system, or that it's not even our responsibility. It must be the environmentalists and the nutritionists to solve. So that's one of the big problems. But Zero Footprint's program is a crowdfunding program where we're asking every business to add a 1% pledge, such that this crowdfunded grant allows farmers to transition to nature preservation, nature restoration, regenerative agriculture in their local context. So like Amri just mentioned, if it's a coffee plantation, how can they incorporate agroforestry such that they increase biodiversity in that local context, where farmers can actually even jump from one crop to another rather than relying on just one single crop. So in the last year, with just about 30 restaurant business partners, we've raised about 1.8 million Hong Kong dollars. That is now going to about 8 different farming projects in Hong Kong and as well as Greater Bay Area. And in coming years, we're going to expand this project to Southeast Asia. Hopefully we'll help to fund some of the farms in Indonesia as well, such that we allow for farmers to become more resilient and allow them to have the power and sovereignty and control of what they want to grow and what they should be growing in their local context.
Yeah, no, thanks, Peggy. And really, if people do want to find out more about Zero Footprint, I encourage you, Peggy, to drop that into the chat, the link, so that people can find out a bit more. But I really think it's absolutely important for us to all think about the role that we can all play to drive these changes in choices through and action. And it's not just we shouldn't just leave it for others. So thank you, Peggy. Judy, I'm going to bring you in. I know DSM has committed to closing the nutrition gap for 800 million people at the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit last year. And which is an amazing commitment and something that's very ambitious, but also just so important and so needed. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the innovative ways that you're partnering with other stakeholders to address malnutrition on the regional and country level population levels?
Sure. I think you hit the key word, synergy, right? Synergies, it's magic, really. When the sum of the parts is greater than the contribution of the individual elements. And so to reach and have an impact at scale, DSM, we really recognize the importance of strategic partnerships and collaborations where each other's strengths and abilities are leveraged. I think a great example is our public-private partnership between DSM, Sight and Life, and World Vision. The program Joining Forces for Last Mile Nutrition, for instance, where we pool our resources and expertise to improve nutrition, especially of women and children, and bringing prosperity through better livelihoods in that last mile, on those last mile communities, communities where are geographically isolated, hard to reach. We have a number of joint projects with World Vision. We have one in Rwanda with Africa Improved Foods, for instance, the exciting project in Indonesia, the last mile entrepreneurship in Brazil, for instance. But let me drill down a little bit more on the what we call the egg-sighting project in Indonesia. It's a project where the drive is to drive demand for improved nutrition by using eggs as an important source of nutrition while improving the livelihoods of the poultry farmers. Another example is our journey on achieving SDG 2 through fortified rice. Why? Well, as in the Asia Pacific region, it's a commonly eaten staple. And unfortunately, the milling process strips most of the micronutrients, rendering it relatively nutritionally poor. And so what we do is we use fortified kernels, which essentially is rice flour made from broken rice, mixed with
Yeah.
vitamin minerals, made into dough, extruded into fortified kernels, not unlike orzo, for instance, and then blended with regular rice. So it looks and tastes like rice, but with better nutrition without changing behavior. And that is so important given the scale that we need to achieve to address the nutrition gap of 800 million people.
Yeah.
So,
No,
yeah.
Yeah, I mean,
Go
Judy,
ahead.
as you were talking, one of the things that jumped out is, that sometimes the processes that we've applied to our food strip out the nutrients, and so we have to add them in. And I think these kinds of things can sometimes, I think, are really important as kind of almost stop gaps for where there's gaps in that nutrition, not instead of a holistic diet, but to ensure that people are getting those nutrients because of the chain.
Yes, definitely. You need different solutions for different circumstances, different contexts. One solution doesn't fit all.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Let me go to you, David. Thanks, Judy. You alluded when we first started, when you first introduced yourself, a little bit about some partnerships, but I'm really interested in understanding how Marvin Group is using public-private partnerships to really drive forward innovation in the agriculture sector.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Look, there's a couple of major partners that we're operating with at the moment. One of them is World Vision. The other is the IFC, part of the World Bank. We've been in discussions and negotiations with the IFC, not only in regard to funding some of our projects, but also into developing a strategic partnership, which means that we are operating in all things we do at international standard. So the IFC has made us realise that we need to look at performance standards that are international. If we're going to be involved in the export business to Europe, for example, or to the US, there are very stringent requirements for traceability and hygiene and quality of the food that goes out of Vietnam into those places. So that's a very important partnership that we have. We work very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture here in regard to everything to do with development, particularly of smart agriculture in Vietnam. I mean, we're very conscious of issues about sustainability, of course, but also about reusing, recycling, and no waste operations in farming. And we are working with the government around this issue of circular agriculture, which is exactly that. I mean, it's reusing, recycling, no waste. So we are, instead of building farms the way we used to, which were a linear approach of inputs and then output animals at the other end, we're now looking at farming complexes where we have breeding farms, commercial farming operations, but also feed mills, fertilizer plants. We're growing ingredients that feed into our feeding operations. So we're having a circular system now, which allows us to use everything that we're producing in our farming operation. And we're doing that in a smart way, and we're interacting with local communities about that. So, we're rethinking the way we actually do our farming, because agriculture traditionally is a great polluter and has been, because people have not really understood the effect they're having on the environment. So issues about pollutants going into the environment, into the waterways, general water waste management, environmental degradation generally has come out of the agricultural sector. So we really need to turn that around. And we're doing that by digital transformation and controlling our inputs, our outputs, and the way we're actually working with local communities. And this is even extended to the way we have our partnerships developing with the local, as I said, the ministry, but also with people like IFC and World Vision. So we're working at a much broader way than we used to, and very concerned about our effect on the environment, what our footprint is, in all of our farming, feed mill, and other operations that we have.
Yeah, no, thanks, David. We're gonna shift the conversation from a little bit towards action, and I want to talk at two levels here. One is about the simple short-term solutions that we can help to use to advance food security and sustainable food systems at the community level, but also the role of business and some of those longer-term solutions and how we drive them forward. And so we have probably about eight or so minutes before we go to our questions, and I see a couple of questions starting to come in. So thank you to those that have put them in. But David, maybe just straight back to you. You were just talking. How does the Marvin Group, how are you thinking also about people and planet? So like thinking about the climate impacts, but also the health impacts in that kind of holistic way, and how are you driving that forward?
Yeah, okay. We're very concerned. As I said, we've shifted our focus over the last few years from being just a producer to now being an agri-food company, where our output at the end of the day is all about food production, clean, healthy, hygienic food for the people of Vietnam in the first instance, but in the broader context, feeding the world. So we have at the board level and at our operational level, we are thinking all the time about how to improve the quality of the end product, and that is the food production for the people of Vietnam. So we look very closely at all of our production methodologies. We look at our inputs, our costs, and what our outputs are. So we're very concerned about traceability right from the beginning of our process, right through the farm-to-table supply chain. And we have inputs all the way along that chain to ensure that we're minimizing excesses and taking advantage of systems that are already in place that we can use to improve our product at the end of the day.
No, that's great. Thanks, David. Judy, bringing you in, how is DSM assisting businesses to implement and optimize their CSR strategies to protect communities?
Thank you, Paul. I think as a nutrition and bioscience company, it's so important for us to create nutrition awareness and the openness to looking at filling that nutrient gap in different ways. We use our core competencies and our platform to really highlight the need, create the demand. We have the depth and breadth of nutrition science with the global reach, but looking at local solutions. So what we do is we work with our customers, our partners, to encourage them, because they know best in terms of how to engage best with their consumers, is to develop nutrition products. And nutritious products are affordable, and looking at different distribution models than what they may currently have, again, because they know their consumers best. And I think the message is that we can all do our part, because you can actually do good and do well at the same time. And another part that we're looking and really shining a light on is on maternal nutrition. Healthy mothers will give healthy babies, reduce mortality for both mom and baby. And by investing in moms, you're investing in the future. So that, again, is shedding light on that and engaging with our partners and customers, and how is it that we can address the nutrient gap with that particular demographic. And another is on school nutrition. Again, it's so important to invest in young minds and bodies and to enable them to thrive. And by, again, shining a light on that will help. And to what David had mentioned in terms of digital transformation, that is so important as well. It's unfortunate with the pandemic. It's encouraged some governments, and ironically, to hold off on fortification, for instance, which has a huge impact at the population level. And so because of the pandemic, resources have been diverted in monitoring and inspections, for instance. Now there's this groundswell taking place on leveraging digital tools to keep some of the less reputable manufacturers honest, ensuring that they deliver what they promise.
Yeah.
Your label claim. Very important.
Yeah, absolutely. And I like that you're looking at the life cycle. I think that's so important. Let me bring you in, Chef Peggy. You know, you work with food in your kitchen and community every day. How does your work engage the community, and what are some of the ways the audience can get involved in food systems transformation?
Well, just as a consumer facing, the representing the consumer facing front, we have an opportunity every single day when we see our customers and be able to share knowledge and educate through our restaurant platforms. And yes, I think that everything that we need to do within the restaurant operation has to be done already, whether it's diverting food waste, recycling, reducing use of plastic, serving less meat, putting more plant-based dishes on your menu. All of that has to be done. But I also know that as a restaurant who has gone through that process, one restaurant doing very well isn't enough to change a system. And hence why we need to look at systemic long-term changes that's great enough to move the needle and great enough to change policies, such that we don't need to pay more for the better options. We don't need to pay more for the more nutritious options. It should be the other way around, right? So as you know, we're in a very unique position in the hospitality sector, mainly because every single check is an opportunity for us to raise funding for nature. Nature-based solutions is heavily underfunded at the moment. Over 86% of those funding comes from the public sector. That means much of it are taxes, right? Only 14% of the funding comes from private sector, but that's only because we are not valuing and equating those environmental and social costs into our selling price. So how do we do this? We can change the system by just incorporating this carbon tax or carbon neutrality fee, whatever you want to call it, such that that funding paid by the customer and channeled through the restaurants can go to help restore our planet, restore soil health. So that's we can basically subsidize a renewable food future if we get together. In Hong Kong, particularly with the highest density of restaurants in the world, we have 15,000 restaurants for a 7.6 million population. Imagine if just 1% of those restaurants raising 10,000 Hong Kong dollars each month, what that aggregate of amount of funding could be to protect nature. So let's look at it from a much more scalable sense of how we can change the entire agricultural system to one that favors people for nutrition, for children, for the security of our future.
Yeah, no, thanks, Peggy. And I can see there's a lot of agreement in the chat just around the role people can play. And I think, you know, it's really good to see. We've heard about how companies are getting involved. We know government and the public sector gets involved, but also how consumers can really utilize their purchasing power, you know, the things that they're investing in, the choices they're making to really make that difference. So thank you. I'm going to bring in Amri. So, you know, we've just talked a little bit about consumers, but how can consumers better connect with farmers at the local level? And what are some of the challenges farmers face in transitioning to regenerative agriculture?
Sure, yeah. Thank you, Paul. I think regenerative agriculture is also one of the main issues that we have here in Indonesia, because like most of the farmer that we have is already like more than 40 years old. In some areas, like even 50, 60 years old, still farming. And the young people not seeing this kind of work as a sexy job, because you need to get your hands dirty, right? Working directly with the soil, with the plants, with the poultry. And also there's the perception that being a farmer will have a low income, especially for, you know, like the millennials and the Gen Z. And so I think to solve this problem, I think we first need to change the perspective, right? I mean, it's all in the perspective. We can work first by you know, like convincing that you can still have a good livelihood through agriculture if it is actually managed well, what you're doing in the farm, in the poultry, and etc. And I think that is also one of the things that we are doing in Edu Farmers by trying to empowering the young people in Indonesia to do farming, right? Because we're opening the opportunity for university student and like fresh graduate to try and do some work in agriculture for 5 to 6 months and work directly with the farmer, with the poultry farmer, and help them increase the productivity and income. And hopefully, like after they're having this kind of experience, it can open up their perspective that this is actually like a good opportunity even for young people, and if managed well, they can also have a good income. Um, and I think we also can possibly do some other things, right? Like for example, promoting the agrotourism so consumer can appreciate more with what farmers are doing and connect more with farmers. I think what Peggy is also doing is really good when connecting like the consumer directly to supporting the farmers. And I think there's also a opportunity for a D2C platform, so direct to consumer, where that allows farmer to sell directly. That can increase the value of the product, like keep the product fresh and improve the sovereignty of the farmers so that they can sell to customer directly instead of like over relying on the local traders that sometimes make the value of the food is really low, right? And I think for the longer term solution would be influencing the policy and also I'm a huge supporter of collaboration. So one of the things that I've been thinking is influencing the policy so that the government can also like promoting the pentahelix collaboration. They can still lead the movement, but then also involving, like from the people, from the academic, the business side, and also the media to make sure that the issue is well addressed, that people understand the importance of the issue, and the long term we can make sure that there is an evidence-based policy for the government to also like improving the food agri-food system, the food resiliency, and also like the regenerative agriculture that we're facing right now.
Yeah, no, thanks, Amri. And I think, that's so critical. Thank you, all of you, for sharing your experiences and perspectives. I want to bring in some of the engagement. It's been great to see the chat going, but I want to bring in some of the questions that are in the from the audience as well. We're going to do this pretty quick fire. So there's a question from Terry, which is, what do you think is the barrier to scale up essentially for fortified rice? And so I think, Judy, you might want to just jump in that, and then maybe we can give us a comment, and then I'll see if anyone else wants to make a quick comment on that as well.
Sure. Thank you for that question. First, I think what Amri mentioned is about developing policy, and it's about recognizing by different stakeholders, whether it's the consumer, on the benefits of fortified rice, and also the government level to mandate that, to know that this can have an impact at scale. So I think those are the hurdles currently, but I think that said, we are making progress. Nothing happens quickly and overnight, but we are making progress in fortified rice as a nutritious staple in various countries. We're working right now, for instance, in the Philippines, and this is mandated in Papua New Guinea, for instance, in the Solomon Islands. So very much a lot of progress being made, but definitely a lot more work to be done.
Yeah, thanks, Judy. And I knowing from conversations I've had with people, one of the things is people misunderstand fortification, what it actually is. And so I think there's a lot on education and just really communicating that it doesn't mess with the flavor. It often uses broken rice. It's actually adding value. Lots of different things that need to happen around that. So I'm just watching the clock tick. I'm going to go to Brian's question now. There's sayings that heat waves can affect crop nutrient level, as well as induce toxicity. How does over climate stress in terms of sustainable food systems that are really nutritious rather than filling up tummies. So looking at how do we look at this nutrition versus meeting hunger needs. And I think this comes up often, but also there's a comment there around the changing climate and this impact that it's having on reducing the nutrient levels as well as inducing toxicity. I know, Peggy, do you want to say something about the nutrition side? And then do we want to have somebody talking to the feeding people versus nutrients? Go, Peggy.
Yeah, I would say I think maybe Amri on the ground would have a bit more experience, but just from working with our farmers in Hong Kong, whether they are organic farmers or now transitioning to regenerative farmers, you can actually see the difference just in the crop size, the leaf size, how I guess plump a vegetable is. So in Hong Kong during this time, it's the wettest season and it's the hardest season to grow food, just in general. Many farmers like just don't even grow anything because it's just the effort that's put into growing food often does not come back. So, but then we saw that regenerative farmers actually the crops that they're growing, such as gourds and melons and cucumbers, can actually withstand heavy rain and more extreme climate measures. And you can see that, you can taste it, which we're really thrilled about to just be able to see it here firsthand.
Yeah. No, thanks, Peggy. Amri, do you want to jump in on build on that?
Sure, Paul. Yeah. No, I think the issue of climate change and the effect that we face is very real. Like some of the example that we have is, for example, a coffee farmer in North Sumatra and Aceh provinces of Indonesia. Because of the climate change, the plant is actually more susceptible to pest and disease, right? Because of the temperature is rising, and also it's getting more difficult to plant coffee. And so what happened is that some of the farmers is actually opening new forests in the higher area, in like higher elevation, because that's where the climate is actually cooler compared to the area that's already been opened. And so I think some of the thing that we can do from the production side is one is agroforestry, like promoting, planting something with the farming, while also doing reforestation, right? So, for example, farmer that plant horticulture, they can also plant some other forestry, or trees that also produce something like oranges or avocado. So that's one thing. Because of the agroforestry, you can increase the number of trees, and also we can also do a carbon sequestration. And the second one, I think we can also do a farming using the permaculture concept, where it's actually the growth of the agricultural ecosystem in a self-sufficient and sustainable way. And also we can also try the low external input sustainable agriculture, where we try to use the inputs for farming that is available around the area. So minimizing the chemical fertilizer and utilizing what the community have at the local level. For example, if there is a poultry farm, they can use the poop from the chicken to become the fertilizer. That's just some of the example, that we have on experience on the ground, Paul.
Yeah, no, thank you, David. Do you want to just jump in around that connection point around some of the challenges of climate and how you guys are seeing that
Sure.
to kind of improve that nutrient level?
Yeah, look, climate change and weather pattern change in Vietnam is a real issue for us, particularly in the Mekong Delta region. I mean, and that's manifested in high levels of salination, which affects what can grow and how it can grow. I mean, there has been some work done on salt-tolerant plants, for example.
Yeah.
There's work done on different strains of rice and other things. But it's not only affecting plants, it's affecting like shrimp farming, for example, where we're drawing water from the river, and if the salination level increases or decreases, it affects the way the shrimp grow and how they behave, etc. So, and that really does affect farmers' outputs. But a lot of this, and you mentioned it briefly before, Paul, is about education and education and awareness in regard to developing smart approaches to agriculture is very important, particularly for small farmers who haven't had access to education about better ways of farming, because most of the techniques are handed down to them from their parents or their grandparents or their uncles and aunts. So it's only now that there is some really clever systems of farming that reduce pollutant, that improve productivity, reduce water level use, all of those sorts of things. And that information is out there. It's just a matter of getting it to farmers so they understand that there is value in investing in quality systems, and often digital systems that allow them to have higher productivity levels and at the end of the day at lower cost, and also less effect on the environment. So all of those things are really important and come together. In Vietnam, we've got more than 70% of the population of 100 million people involved in agriculture in one form or another. So it's a very, very large and important part of the country's economy. And of course, looking at the use of pesticides and herbicides and fertilizers is very important as well, because that adds to the pollution of the waterways and the general environment. So, and again, it gets down to education on how people use those things. Instead of the old-fashioned way of loading up a backpack and spraying everything with as much as you possibly can and not being concerned about where the residues go, now people are forced to consider what effect that does have on the environment so that their farming can be sustainable. And sustainability is a big issue. You know, we've got to look at sustainability and livelihood management into the future. And that's what we need to focus on.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, thank you, David. I mean, we're coming to the end. There is a number of additional questions there and comments. There's quite a few, Judy, heading towards fortification, and just, asking about the focus on women and children, for asking also about some of the other kinds of varieties, like a golden rice, which is different, which is, a GMO. Do you want to just make we've probably got room for 1 minute quick response, and if not, we can get people to follow up, and then we need to kind of wrap.
Yeah, I just wanted to say it's not based on my fellow panelists here. We're all working towards the same goal from different perspectives, which I think is wonderful. And I think it comes down to understanding where each of us play and being able to leverage our own strengths and to work together at scale to provide some really affordable, nutritious foods. As Peggy mentioned, nutritious foods should not be expensive. We should be able to make it so it's affordable and accessible to those that need it the most. And I think this is where having this panel and this forum to discuss hopefully will highlight all that we need to do to really elevate the nutritional status of those who need it the most, to be able to develop and have a promising future. So I think I'd like to hand it back to you, but certainly open to further discussion with those who are interested to discuss further.
Yeah, no, thanks, Judy. And you can go into the platform and obviously ask questions or send to people's profiles. So if you do have follow-ups, please utilize that function in the platform for the rest of this conference. So I just want to thank everyone for a really amazing, engaging discussion. And we've delved into hunger and malnutrition in the Asia Pacific region specifically. And I think this is so critical, because at the moment, we know that this is a major impact affecting a significant population, proportion of the population. And it can't be done by any one actor alone or done in isolation. So some of my main takeaways from our conversation today are that, partnerships across sectors are crucial to solving complex issues. We need to have people working together, bringing their unique perspectives to the table to help each other improve what we're doing. And I think that, we've heard about some of those partnerships today in different ways between restaurants and consumers, between private sector and public, between farmers and chefs, all different kinds of engagements across food production to food packaging, lots of different connections. I also think that one key thing is that there is no one solution, but really a collection of solutions that's needed to do this. And I think this is really important. We need to look at diversity of diets, and we need to look at fortification, and we need to look at how we're improving the nutrition of our soils and the way that we're getting those nutrients into the produce that we're growing. We need all of these things concurrently. And I think, David, you really raised a good point. You were talking a little bit about, fertilizers and pesticides, but there is a role here of targeting. And I think targeting solutions to the right populations, and it came up in one of the questions around, pregnant women, children, thinking about where, these interventions can have the greatest impact. And I think this is really critical, and targeting of interventions for farmers in a way that enables them to actually succeed and thrive through financing, and lots of different other elements have come through. I think that the final point is we can all do something. And Peggy talked a little bit about this, and so did a number of our other panelists, is that this is not something we're going to fix if we just leave it for somebody else to do. We all can step up, we can all make an effort, we can all do something in our small choices and our big choices around how we work. So I want to thank our terrific panel, Chef Peggy, Amri, David, Judy. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and experiences and really bringing this conversation to life. As you each noted, there's very real challenges, but also very real opportunities to really drive forward a zero hunger world and good food for all. Thank you to our audience for tuning into today's discussion on sustainable food systems and the interplay of community, corporations, and civil society. We really appreciate your time and commitment to ensuring good food for all, and I hope you've enjoyed this lively discussion as much as I have. Thank you, and back to you, Rahul.
Thank you, Paul, for moderating this lovely and insightful discussion on the systems thinking for sustainable food. We really appreciate the different points of view from each of our panelists, David, Judy, Peggy, Amri, for coming on board and sharing your thoughts and views. World Vision does a lot in this particular space, and as you heard during this panel, we work with different systems players as well. You want to learn more about how World Vision works in this particular space, just click on this link on the chat and you can reach out to us to learn more about us. So thank you all for joining for the opening session of day 2. We are now heading to a quick networking break. When you log back onto the main stage, you can click onto the different country booths. We have our booth managers and our colleagues from different countries who you can catch up with, who you can meet and interact. You can also use the schedule meeting to set up one-on-one calls and meetings over this platform, maybe probably for a few minutes as well. You can also visit the lounge and virtually roam around and meet like-minded and like-hearted individuals attending today's sessions. There might be a specific topic that you want to talk about. Probably it's youth engagement, probably it's about food systems, probably it's about volunteerism. You have colleagues who will be there on those tables. You can just click on join on those tables and engage with our colleagues as well. By 11:15 Singapore time, we will commence our concurrent sessions focusing on innovative projects and current donors, as well as with the prospective donors across Cambodia, Indonesia, Thailand, and Vietnam. Cambodia would be focusing their discussions on adolescents, and their architects of future. Indonesia would be talking about climate change and livelihoods. Thailand session would be about empowering vulnerable youth. And in Vietnam, we'll be talking about how digital savings groups are mitigating the impact of COVID-19. So before we head out for the networking break and the concurrent sessions, a reminder that you may all join us back for the main plenary at 12 p.m. Singapore time to talk about climate change and the bottom line. How can corporations reverse the trend? We have an illustrative panel joining us at 12 p.m. Singapore time. So over to you, and thank you for taking the time to join us for this session. And thanks to all the panel for this insightful discussion as well.